What is up, sisters? This is your boy, Feb, and welcome back to the channel for another modded companion build guide for Baldur's Gate 3. I hope you're having a fantastic day, because today we are finishing off the Origin Companions portion of this series, creating a fully modded build guide for each companion in the game. The ultimate goal here is to be able to load each of these into a game with some added difficulty mods and run a massive 11-person party for our journey across Faerun. And today, we're covering Will Ravengard, the Blade of Frontiers himself. Before we get into it, thank you so much for watching. If you like these kind of videos, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to my channel for more videos like this. If there's something you would do differently with this build, let me know in the comments down below. I really love talking theory crafting with y'all in the comments. It's so much fun. But without further ado, let's hop right into the build. So when we take a look at Will Ravengard, we have a few options for which modded class to pick for him. His default class in the base game is a Warlock of the Fiend subclass due to his pact with the Devil, Mizora. Because of the way Warlocks work, there isn't really a super lore-friendly way to respec him into another type of Warlock subclass, since his patron is always going to be Mizora. If we were waiting for patch 8, the Oath of the Crown Paladin makes for an excellently thematic respec after he breaks himself free of the pact, assuming you make choices throughout the game that lead you down that path. But even that is going to be vanilla soon, and on this channel we use mods, so not quite. Instead, I suggest we build Will into a WyrmSworn. The WyrmSworn modded class was created by Echo0000 and combines aspects of the Warlock, the Paladin, and the Sorcerer classes, but with an elemental twist. Instead of swearing an oath to an ideal, like vengeance, devotion, or the Oath of the Ancients, we can instead pick a specific type of dragon to make an oath to serve. As a result, your smites will no longer dish out radiant damage. Instead, your smites will deal damage from the type of dragon you have sworn your oath to. Why are we swearing an oath to a dragon, though? In Act 3, any number of NPCs will tell you about Onsor, the great worm that is said to live beneath Worm's Rock. Surprise, surprise! Eventually, when you make your way down there, you find that the dragon is dead, but uses its power to speak to you and reveal some pretty wild plot twists that involve our pal, Squidward. Given that Will absolutely loves his hometown of Baldur's Gate and would do anything to save it, even make a literal deal with the devil, we're going to pretend that his experience leads Will to swear an oath to the dragon, known as the Heart of the Gate. Now, we know that Onsor is a bronze dragon, which means he's technically a lightning elemental dragon, but for this build, we're going to do a little bit of flubbing and go for the cold damage just because there's a specific weapon that I want to use, which we'll get to later. So let's go ahead and start leveling this character up. Starting at level 1, we are going to take the WyrmSworn class, and we're going to go for the Blade of the Worm subclass. This is the Paladin style subclass that gains extra attack and deals huge elemental smites. You can see here, the Blade of the Worm are Dragon Knights, combining physical prowess with the crushing power of draconic magic. By wielding smite attacks empowered by their dragon blood, they strike down foes with righteous fury, channeling draconic energy into every attack. The Blade of the Worm specializes in brutal, close-range combat, turning the tide into overwhelming strikes and powerful defensive auras. So one of the interesting things about this class that it has going for it is that it doesn't use spell slots. Instead, we have what we call dragon blood charges. These come to us as a single resource that can be used for low-level spells or higher-level spells from the very start of the game, similar to psi points if you're familiar with the Mystic class. What this means is that even though we gain access to spells like Hypnotic Pattern, Elemental Weapon, Call Lightning, Counterspell, and Glyph of Warding at the very beginning of the game, even Fireball, the caveat here is that we only start with 3 blood charges, so we can only use this once per long rest at this low levels. Alternatively, if we choose something like Ice Knife that costs 1 blood charge, we can do it 3 times per long rest, which is really awesome. For the spells that we are going to choose here, we're going to start with just 1. We have 1 option, and since we are an ice-based WyrmSworn, we're going to go for the Ice Knife. This will also help out because we can do it 3 times at these levels, like I mentioned previously. For our cantrips, we are going to take Ray of Frost and Shocking Grasp, because they're both going to be very helpful for this build. And for our Draconic Oath here, this is where we choose what type of dragon that we want to go with. If we were going fully lore-friendly, we would just go with a bronze dragon, being Onsor, but we're going to go with either a silver or a white dragon because these are the ones associated with cold types. The silver dragon is technically an evil aligned dragon, so we're going to go ahead with the white dragon because Will is usually good aligned. This is also going to give us access to a cold draconic breath attack, which is super fun to use despite not being a dragonborn race, so that's really cool. We get to be a human and still breathe fire, or ice, I guess. For our ability scores, this class is going to get a +3 instead of a +2 bonus, similar to this modder's interpretation of the Artificer class mod. Although this might seem kind of broken at first, it really just enables us to start with an 18 in one stat, which really isn't as nuts as it sounds. For instance, in my current D&D campaign, I'm playing as a Turtle Barbarian Path of the Giant, and rolling for my ability scores at level 1, plus my racial bonuses, I ended up with an 18 in both Constitution and Strength, so this really isn't that unheard of. For this class, Constitution is going to be our primary stat that is used for most of our abilities, including spell casting, so we want to put our +3 there and bring it to 18. This is also going to give us +4 for our saving throws on concentration and other things like that, and it's going to give us a bunch more HP. We also want to put a +1 into Strength and bring that up to 16, because this is going to provide us a nice bump to our carry weight, our attack rolls, and our weapon damage, because our weapons are going to scale primarily with strength, although the vast majority of our damage is going to be ice damage, which isn't going to be relying on strength. We still want to go ahead and take it anyway. We don't need too much for dexterity, but we're going to take 14 here for the initiative and armor class bonuses. We'll get a +2 to both. We are taking a wisdom at 10 and dumping charisma and intelligence both at 8. Wisdom at 10 is just kind of a standard level, and intelligence and charisma we don't really need very much for this character, so we are going to go ahead and dump them for constitution, strength, and dexterity here. Moving up to level 2, the WyrmSworn is going to earn 2 draconic petitions. These are sort of like warlock invocations, but granted to us by our draconic patron as opposed to our devil patron. Each of these options here is geared towards each of the 3 subclasses, as some focus on breath attacks and some on our dragon blood, and some offer more support options. The 2 that we are going to take for now are the ones at the top called Blood Gift and Worm's Rebirth. Blood Gift allows us to recharge a dragon blood charge the first time you cast a spell in combat. So our smites count as spells and other things count as spells too. So basically this just means every time we get in combat we get a free spell and we get a free dragon blood charge back. On the other hand, Worm's Rebirth is going to restore half of your dragon blood on a short rest. So what this is going to mean is that it pairs really well with a bard or any other short rest recharging subclass, because you can just kind of keep recharging and get more and more dragon blood charges every short rest. At level 3, we are going to gain the Draconic Tail ability, which is going to make us immune to the prone ability by helping us maintain our balance with our tail, I suppose. Additionally, Draconic Knowledge is going to give us expertise in 2 skills, and for these, I'm going to be taking Athletics and Perception, just because these are really good ones to have on this character. We're a strength character, and Perception is just really good to have, so I'm going to go ahead and take those. We are now going to get another new spell, and at this level, I'm going to take Shield of Faith. This spell allows us to boost our armor class by +2 on our bonus action, costs 1 blood charge, and lasts until long rest, unless you lose concentration. You could choose something else here, like Misty Step, or whatever, but I am going to go with Shield of Faith because we don't have too many blood charges at these low levels, and we want to be able to use them on things that are really powerful, and giving us a boost to our armor class is great because this character also is limited to medium armor. This class is also one that gets to pick its own specific weapon proficiencies, and here you can grab whatever type of weapon you find yourself using in the early game. I recommend going for the Sparky Points early in the game. It's a trident, and it's a good weapon for this level. You can get it at Joaquin's Rest for saving Counselor Floric. I'm going to go with tridents because of that, and also longbows, so we can add a stat stick. At level 4, we are going to get a feat, and you would think that given our use of two-handed weapons, like a trident, that we would be taking Great Weapon Master here. The main problem with this is that we don't have any significant methods for increasing our hit chance besides giving ourselves more points into strength. So with lower hit chance, we're always going to be around 50-50 if we're using Great Weapon Master, which I don't really like. I like having a high hit chance. Plus, most of our damage is going to be coming from cold damage anyway, so our physical weapon damage is more of a vehicle for applying our cold damage. If you choose to go with a versatile weapon, which this build will use, then a shield is better for more AC anyway, since this class wears medium armor, like I've mentioned. Instead, I'm going to take an ability score improvement for +2 to strength, so we can get a higher hit chance and a little bit extra weapon damage. At level 5, we get a couple of new abilities. Draconic Presence is going to allow us to, once per combat, when an enemy hits you, they may be turned. This is kind of similar to turning undead, but you can turn anybody now because you have a dragon and you're terrifying. Draconic Heritage also allows you to, once per turn per enemy, when you deal damage, you deal an extra 1d4 oath damage. So this is going to add an extra 1d4 cold damage on top of all of our attacks once per turn, which is really awesome because we're going to be doing 2 attacks, so might as well get an extra 1d4 off of it. We're also going to be getting Worm's Ascendancy. Your smites never deal less than half damage, so that's really awesome. It's going to just give us a lot more consistency. We're also going to be getting extra attack like most other martial classes. For our cantrip, I am going to be taking Thaumaturgy, just because why not? Additionally, we're going to get another spell at this level, and now we have access to some really insanely powerful spells. 6th level spells even, like Wall of Ice, Autoluke's Freezing Sphere, we've got Cone of Cold in here, we've got a ton of stuff. The thing is that these are all very expensive to use, and we could find much more powerful uses with our called smites. So that is kind of what we're going to focus on. The main caveat here being that we can use them once before we run out of dragon blood charges and need to short rest or long rest even. Because of that, I'm going to avoid the super high level ones for now and start with Ice Storm. I said I was going to avoid super high level. This is pretty high level still, but not that bad. This one is going to be able to apply a huge blanket of ice on the ground so that you can make your enemies prone and just get really good advantage off of that. It's also just going to do a lot of damage on its own. Really great spell. Otherwise, you could go with something like Misty Step or Glyph of Warding if you wanted to, or Fire Shield. We're going to take this one later, but we have a bunch of different options here, but I like Ice Storm because it's a really huge AoE and it's a really awesome spell. I like it a lot. Additionally, since we are immune to prone and we can't slip on our own ice, so we can just kind of skate around and smash all of our prone enemies, which is really fun. We can also pick 2 more weapon proficiencies, and this is, again, mostly up to whatever weapons you have at the moment. I'm just going to grab heavy crossbows and warhammers because I know exactly what weapon I'm going to use. I'm going to use a trident, and we already have it. At level 6, we're going to get 2 more draconic petitions, and at this point, I am going to be taking Draconic Fortitude to gain advantage on Constitution saving throws and intimidation checks. This is going to replace our need for Warcaster and is going to help us keep up our Shield of Faith ability so that we can keep it going at all times. Additionally, we are going to be taking Wyrm's Might. Recover 1 Dragon Blood when killing with a Smite. Basically, this means if we see an enemy with low enough health that we can kill them with 1 attack, we can get a free Smite out of it, which is really awesome. At level 7, we are going to get Dark Vision up to 24 meters, which is really awesome to have. We're also going to gain Draconic Eyes. You gain Superior Dark Vision and See Invisibility at start of turn. Enemies may be frightened. Once an enemy is frightened, they cannot be frightened again. Basically, this just means that if enemies can see us, they're possibly going to get frightened by us because our Dragon Eyes are so scary that enemies are afraid to look at us. Draconic Mind is also going to give us advantage on wisdom saving throws, which is really awesome. We're also going to get this new ability called Wyrm's Frenzy. Burn your blood to get a free melee weapon attack this turn. This one is nice to use if you want to. You can spend 3 dragon blood just to get an extra weapon attack. I don't find that this is super useful very often, but because we're going to be doing so much damage otherwise. But if you need to, this is great to have if you want to get an extra melee attack. For our next spell, we're actually going to be taking Autoluke's Freezing Sphere, which is going to be our big nuke attack that we can also just store some ice balls in our pockets. Short rest and then throw like 3 of them out back to back. I'm looking at you, Merkel. This spell does 10d6 cold damage, create a ball of churning ice that can be launched instantly to generate a frosty explosion or stored for later use. You can store it in your inventory for 10 turns, which means that you can potentially just create 1, 2, 3, and then throw them all real quick. We're also going to be earning 2 more weapon proficiencies, and once again, you can kind of pick whatever you want. I'm going to grab Longsword and Great Axe here. At level 8, we're going to get a new feat, and at this level, I'm going to be taking the Savage Attacker feat. When making melee weapon attacks, you roll your damage dice twice and use the highest result. We're going to be doing mostly melee weapon attacks, so this is going to help us to do even more damage, and we're also going to be rolling a lot of damage riders, so this is going to be bumping that up even more. At level 9, we learn how to fly. That's freaking sweet. We also gain immunity to our Dragon Wyrm Oath element, which means we have immunity to cold damage, which is also really cool. We're also going to be getting a new cantrip, and at this level, I'm going to go ahead and grab Light, just because whatever. We also are going to be getting a new spell, and at this level, I'm going to be taking the spell Fire Shield. We're going to be applying the chill version, which will give us resistance to fire damage in addition to our cold immunity, and deal retaliatory cold damage back to attackers. This is really great because it's going to mean that we just, if an enemy comes up and attacks us, they're going to get a big cold damage right back at them. Also, we get 2 more weapon proficiencies, and it's, once again, your choice. I'm going to do hand crossbows and short swords just for fun. At level 10, we get 2 more draconic petitions, and my choice here is for Wyrm's Bloodlust. Recover 1 dragon blood when killing 2 enemies in the same turn. So this is going to help us regain dragon blood when we kill, obviously, 2 enemies in 1 turn, which is going to allow us to use our AoEs, like Auto Luke's Freezing Sphere, to be able to do a big AoE attack and then just gain more Dragon Blood back in return. You toss in a Smite and you get 2 free Dragon Blood charges, plus another if it's your first spell in combat. So potentially with one first level Smite, we could gain 2 more charges than we had before the Smite. We're also going to be taking Share the Blood damage. Nearby allies gain 1d4 oath damage in their attacks. So this is a really cool ability that you can use, and it's going to, like it said here, you can use it on a bonus action. It costs a Dragon Blood, and for 3 turns, your allies will gain 1d4 oath damage, which is cold for us. And because we are going to be using the wet status effect, our allies will get double damage from this if they hit our wet targets, which is really great. At level 11, we get Draconic Invocation, which is once per game, you can channel the breath of the Great Worm, your sworn oath. This is kind of like our version of the Cleric's Divine Intervention, but it's a huge Draconic breath attack that you can only do 1 time ever. So use it well. We also gain Draconic Spirit once per combat. When you fall down, restore 5d20 HP. So that's really awesome. You can regenerate possibly up to 100 HP at the max. The minimum, it's going to be 5, but still 5 is more than 1, which is what Death Ward is. So this is a very powerful Death Ward ability that can be used once per combat, which is insane. It also says here that we gain access to all these different chromatic worm smites, but we have always had access to our cold one, and I don't know why it says we have access to these other ones, because as you will see, we do not have access to the lightning, the acid, or the fire, or the poison damage. We pretty much only have the cold one, but that's really the only one we need. Not sure why it says it here. We also get a really powerful new ability called Wyrm's Cataclysm. With this ability, our smites are now doing max damage at all times at the cost of half of our Dragon Blood charges. What this means is we have fewer of them to inflict, but we do far more consistent and insane damage with them, especially abusing the wet effect for doubling that damage. And when we kill an enemy with it, it's going to recharge it. So if we just use 1 at a time, we're going to be just refilling easy, easy, easy. For our spell, I'm going to grab Misty Step because I haven't grabbed it yet, and it's a really great spell to have access to. And for our last 2 weapon proficiencies, you can take pretty much whatever you want. Again, at this point, we have access to pretty much every weapon in the game except for 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And I had access to shields also because as a human, we get native access to shields. And finally, when we reach level 12, we get 1 last spell, and at this point, I am going to be taking Counterspell just because it is a really great spell to have. We don't want to use this very often, but if we don't have any spell slots on any of our other characters, then it is great to be able to have a backup version here, and we don't really need anything else here. You could take Cone of Cold if you wanted, but it's pretty expensive compared to the other ones, and we already have Auto Luke's Freezing Sphere, which is very expensive. You could use Wall of Ice also, but it's also pretty expensive. So I'm going to try to keep it lower and focus on our smites more than anything. For our feat at level 12, we could take a couple different things. We could go into an ability score improvement and bring our strength up to 20 if you wanted to. This would give us a higher hit chance and would also increase our damage by a little bit. We could also take Elemental Adept. Your spells and attacks ignore resistance to a damage type of your choice. When you cast spells of that type, you cannot roll a 1. This would be really awesome because we have cold damage, but unfortunately for our enemies, we are doing so much cold damage as it is that we can kind of circumvent enemies' cold resistances. If there's any enemy that is resistant to cold, we're still going to be doing an insane amount of damage to them, and we're going to be making them wet, so we're going to be, doing kind of going around it. For that reason, I'm going to be taking the ability score improvement and bumping our strength up to 20, because I feel that the hit chance and the damage and the saving throw bonuses are going to be a better choice for us, in my opinion. But now that we have covered the leveling and skills for this character, let's pop back out and look at the gear and equipment for this Icy Draconic Paladin build. So when it comes to gear for this class, we are obviously going to be focusing on cold damage. So that means that we have access to a bunch of really cool cold focused armor and equipment that is going to help us really get the ball rolling. We are going to be starting by taking the Cold Brim Hat, Cold Brim Chill. Once per turn, any condition inflicted on a target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. We're going to be doing that a lot, so we're going to be applying a ton of Encrusted with Frost because we are going to be applying a lot of different conditions. We are also going to be using the Vivacious Cloak. You gain 8 temporary hit points after casting a spell in melee. We are going to be always casting spells in melee because our smites count as spells, so every time that we smite, we're going to gain 8 temporary hit points, which is really nice. We're also going to be using the Flame Enameled Armor. You gain a +2 bonus to initiative rolls. You have resistance to fire damage and a +2 bonus to saving throws. You also have disadvantage on stealth attacks, but that's okay. And we're also going to gain access to Fire Shield Warm. Even though we have access to Fire Shield as a spell, this is just going to give us a free use of it that we can use once per day, so that we don't have to use our Dragon Blood charges on casting Fire Shield. Additionally, we're going to be using the Winter's Clutches. When the wearer deals cold damage, inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost upon the target. We're going to be dealing cold damage with every hit, and we're also going to be inflicting status effects, so that is going to be applying 4 turns of Encrusted with Frost per turn, which is really awesome. We're also going to be using the Vital Conduit boots. When the wearer casts a spell that requires concentration, they gain 8 temporary hit points, and you also get a +1 to your athletics. So I know that we're wearing 2 pieces of gear that provide us temporary hit points, but they provide us temporary hit points from different places. So this one is going to give it to us with our concentration slot, which is going to give us pretty much, which we are going to use exclusively when we apply our Shield of Faith. However, once we enter combat, those 8 temporary hit points are not going to last just very long. So the cloak, on the other hand, is going to enable us to reapply those temporary hit points after they get removed from us when we get attacked. That way we can keep applying them without having to cast our Shield of Faith over and over and again. These are just going to help us get started at the beginning of the day. We're also going to be wearing the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, add your spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt. If we are in range for whatever reason and we don't want to use one of our slots, we can go ahead and use Ray of Frost, and this one will just give us extra, it'll give us our spellcasting modifier in addition, which is, for us, it's Constitution 4, so we're going to get 4 extra damage off of it. If our targets are wet, then they're going to get even more off of that. We're also going to be using the Snowburst Ring. When the wearer deals cold damage, they also create a 4.5 meter circle of ice around the target. This is really awesome because it just means every time we attack someone, because our weapon attacks are going to be doing cold damage, they are going to get ice all around them, and they're going to slip and fall. We're going to combine that with the Ring of Elemental Infusion. When you deal acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage using a spell or cantrip, that element infuses your weapon. So if you do need to then use one of your cantrips here, it will then give you an extra 1d4 of cold damage to your first successful weapon attack. Just really awesome to be able to get extra damage on our weapon attacks. At a certain point, cantrips are not going to be super useful for you, so you could trade it out for Killer Sweetheart or another ring of your choice. But at the early levels of the game, I'm going to go ahead and use the Ring of Elemental Infusion. For our weapons, we're going to be using a really interesting weapon that I've been dying to get some use out of since I started playing Baldur's Gate 3. The Trident of the Waves is a really cool weapon which has the ability called the Water Collar. On a hit, create a 2-meter water surface centered around the target. So basically, this is what this weapon is going to do is every time we hit someone with it, they're just going to get water drenched all over them, and then the water is going to freeze around them because it also does 1d4 cold damage. So that's going to trigger our Snowburst Ring. So they're going to get wet, and then they're going to get cold, and they're going to get encrusted with frost. Every hit of our weapon is going to make someone wet and frosty, and they're going to be really, really cold, and we are loving it. This weapon only has a +1 to weapon enchantment. So what we're going to do is when you get to Act 3, we're going to grab the Drakethroat Glaive. So we're not really going to use this weapon for what its main purpose is. What we're going to do with it instead is use the Draconic Elemental Weapon buff that is on the weapon, and if you go ahead and put it here. So the great thing about this buff, Draconic Elemental Weapon, that comes on the Drakethroat Glaive is that it gives you an instance of Elemental Weapon, which is a spell that we do get access to with our subclass, but we don't want to use it because it's going to take our concentration slot, and since we're getting attacked a lot, even though we have advantage on Constitution saving throws, we might get knocked out of it. So the nice thing about Draconic Elemental Weapon buff is that it doesn't require concentration, and you don't even have to put it on the Drakethroat Glaive. What we're going to do here is drop our Trident of the Waves on the ground, and then we're going to take Cold Elemental Weapon here from the Draconic Drakethroat Glaive, put it on that weapon. We're going to pick it up, and we're going to put it right here. And now you can see we have a +1 and a +1 weapon enchantment, so overall a +2. And when we hover over our weapon, we have a +1d4 and +1d4 cold damage. You can see we now have the Draconic Elemental Weapon on without concentration, and we can just have this in our inventory and get a free 1d4 out of it. Really awesome. Now, because we're not using Great Weapon Master, we don't want to wield this two-handed. We're going to grab the Absolute's Protector. If the wielder bears the Absolute's brand, all damage received from spells is reduced by 1. We're not going to get branded as well, so we don't really need this that bad. But what we do get out of this is another use of Fire Shield Chill. This is going to apply us another version of this, in addition to the Flame Enameled Armor, so that we can do it once per day without spending a spell slot, or without using our Dragon Blood charges. It's really awesome to be able to go ahead and do it again. Now we have 2 free uses. But that pretty much does it for the gear on this class. We're going to be significantly cold heavy, and we are going to be just really powerful. So let's go ahead and go out to Baldur's Gate and see what we can do with this. So we have landed here in the Worm's Crossing, and we are going to initiate combat with these fist guys, just so I can show you what everything looks like. And to start, we are going to pop ourselves into... We're going to want to make sure that we have our Shield of Faith active. And I already do, so we're not going to need to do that. But the next thing that we're going to do is pop ourselves into turn-based mode, and then we are going to apply... So the first thing we're going to do is apply our Fire Shield Chill. This one is the one coming from our shield, and we are going to then go ahead and start combat. And so the way that you generally want to play this character is, because our trident is going to be applying the wet surface and making our enemies wet and applying vulnerability to the cold damage, we're going to want to start by hitting our enemy with a generic weapon attack and then following it up with a smite, because the smite will have double damage based off of that. So we're going to start by hitting this enemy right here with a basic attack.
You were witnessed assaulting someone.
Yes, yes, I know. Now, I can't seem to figure out for myself why attacking outside of combat seems to deny me my extra attack on my action, even though it should have worked that way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to burn some dragon blood so that I can burn my blood to get a free melee weapon attack this turn and pretend that I just have what I needed. So now, because this enemy has 6 turns of Encrusted with Frost and has the wet status effect for 3 turns, they are vulnerable to our cold damage and will take double damage from it. They've also been frightened because they're scared of our draconic gaze. So we are going to go ahead and grab our Chromatic Worm Smite, cold damage, and you can see here, we can upcast it however we want. At 1 level, it gets 1d6 plus 7 piercing damage, plus 1d4 cold, plus 1d4 plus a flat 16 cold damage. You can then upcast it to increase that 16 to a 24, to a 32, 40, a 48, and a 56, keeping in mind that we just made this enemy wet, so that all of those numbers are going to be doubled. So 16 is now 32, 24 is 48, 32 is 64, 40 is 80, 48 is 96, and 56 is 112. So this guy only has 23 health, so we only need to do a 1-level smite against him, because it's going to do a minimum of 26 times 2 damage, which is a lot. You can see there, 32, 23, 10, and 4. Let's look at the numbers on that. Yep, 32, 10, 13, and there's a 4. So, really crazy. Let's go ahead and end our turn. Oh, he's frightened too, because I look so scary. You can't trip me. You can hit my Fire Shield Chill, though. So now we have obviously lost our temporary hit points, but if we go ahead and cast our smite here, we're going to go ahead and do that. But first, we're going to hit this guy with a regular attack so that we can get him wet and apply a frosty surface. Now there's ice everywhere, and he is wet and encrusted with frost, 6 turns and 3 turns. And we are going to top it off by, how much health does he have? 35. We only need to do this one. Let's go ahead and do it. And you can see every time we do that, we gain 1 back. And because we killed an enemy, we also gain 1 back again. So we have 1 more than we did before. Now we're going to go ahead and walk on over here, skate over our ice, and make this archer hate us. Oh, I've been ensnared. Well, that's okay, because what I do have is Mercy Step. Good thing I grabbed it. I'm not sure where that 4 force damage is coming from. I think there's some ability that's happening, but it's not. It's mostly negligible. So we're going to go ahead and now he has 58 health. We're going to hit him with our first attack. Oh, we missed. Well, that's okay. He doesn't need to be wet, because we're going to hit him with a 6th level smite. I want to show you all what that looks like. So he wasn't wet, but we did how much damage to him? 6, 56, 12, and 1. So if you can imagine, if we had hit him with that first attack and he'd be wet, that would do like at minimum 112 damage. If you do a 6th level smite at all, when an enemy is wet, it's going to do minimum 112 damage, which is absolutely insane. considering that we're also regenerating our dragon blood charges. It's really just, it's super powerful and it's a ton of fun, and it really kind of gives you a whole draconic paladin type of feel that is not really represented in anywhere else in the game. Obviously, the thing that makes us overpowered is the wet effect, and being able to combine that with cold, because that's one of the most powerful things about being a sorcerer. We're just combining that with the ideas of being a paladin and being able to smite with it, which is really fun and really powerful. But that just about does it for this build video, making Will Ravengard into a frosty WyrmSworn Paladin. What do you think of this build? I think it has a really nice spin on the Paladin style gameplay through the lens of a draconic sorcerer. I'm really excited to play with this around and just get some more good game time out of it. That's kind of funny that you can see his toes here with these boots on. That's okay. Put them dogs away, Will. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.